Hey everyone, hope you're doing well today. Just wanted to go over some of our information from last week and then also move on to this week's material. So last week we talked a little bit about kind of some of the tools or general information that we use to guide ethical decision making in healthcare administration. So things like mission, vision, and values, various professional codes of ethics, committees, all sorts of various things that we might use. The code of conduct in an organization is an important piece as well. And myself, having worked in compliance, my task was to create the code of conduct for my organization. So it's really important to have a good understanding of culture and values in order to be able to move into creating that type of a document. So in our discussion, talking about the importance of codes of ethics, codes of conducts, I look forward to looking at your group assignment. Haven't looked at those yet, but we'll be getting to those in the next day or so. And then the quiz, which we'll talk about in just a second. So let's take a look at a few of the quiz questions for this week. So I did actually, this question, I'm sure you were probably giggling to yourself when you were actually taking the test. So the last time I offered this class was last summer, so a year ago, and I had an issue with the question. I had the question duplicated in the quiz, and they had different answers. So this is the correct answer to this question. You saw this question twice on the quiz, but in this question stem for the second one was a note to myself to remember to remove that and replace it with another question. And I just didn't even look at it. Didn't even notice that it was like that. So the Hippocratic Oath is obviously kind of the ancient oath of those in the healing arts, and still taken by, it's still kind of a tradition to recite the Hippocratic Oath at a graduation ceremony for physicians. But what's interesting about it is it's mostly obsolete. Just think of the progress that the world has gone through since that time. Most of it is really obsolete. There's elements in there about, that physicians can't perform abortions. Obviously, physicians couldn't be involved in physician-assisted suicide. Had physicians very involved in things like nutrition and areas where now we have specialists in those areas of medicine, and physicians aren't tasked with those elements anymore. So the correct answers here, and this is a select all that apply question. I know you've seen them from me before. I don't know about my colleagues how often they use them, but you're going to be selecting, and I'll always say select all the answers that are true or select all that apply. So the three that were correct were contains largely obsolete sections about relationships between physicians and their teachers or students, prohibits physicians, option B, and then also D, has never received public sanction or force of law, because it's a code of conduct is what it is. It was not replaced by the AMA's principles of medical ethics, but those principles are more in line with today's medical practice. But the Hippocratic Oath still exists, and really the main focus of the Hippocratic Oath that we see that folks really focus on now is do no harm. So that's really the key. And especially in our current environment where the rise of the patient safety professional and also just patient safety measures being put in place, the notion of do no harm as part of the Hippocratic Oath is really one of the main reasons that's still focused on today. But so our answers were A, B, and D, but you got full credit for both times that question appeared in the quiz. But I just wanted you to be aware of the accurate information. So next one, it is helpful if the organization's philosophy statement is, lots of different answers here, but the correct answer is sufficiently precise so that performance in achieving it can be measured. So, you can have a lovely philosophy statement that, that talks about what you want your organization to be or what your overall organization's philosophy is. But if you can't measure it in any way, like for example, you may say, we want to be the best provider of care in the world. Well, how would you measure that? There aren't really metrics out there to measure, okay, what are you defining as the best care? Who are you benchmarking yourself against? All of those types of things. So you want to make sure that your philosophy is goal oriented, but is a SMART goal. So I'm sure I don't think any of my classes at the graduate level talk about SMART goals, but I'm sure that Dr. Frendak, Dr. Hampe both have. And if you've taken my strategic planning class at the undergraduate level, we talk a lot about SMART goals in there. I think we have at least one student in this group that was an undergrad with us as well. But SMART goals are all about the types of goals that can actually be measured instead of something that's just kind of pie in the sky. So we want a philosophy statement to really be something that we can measure against to see if we're achieving it. And if we're not achieving it, then what do we have to do to put ourselves in a position where we can? Next question, what is culture? So culture is a lot of things, but of these things listed here, it is the written and unwritten rules of behavior. So when you think about, and it's interesting in the book, there's a whole story about businessmen, and I say businessmen because that's the area of, or the time period that they're talking about, but businessmen and the 2 martini lunch and how that was acceptable. So obviously that was never written down that it's okay to go out and, schmooze a client at lunchtime and have a couple martinis. That was kind of an unwritten rule of behavior at that time. And now we're seeing a shift in that culture. We're seeing people, operate in a more moral and ethical manner. We're seeing less conflicts of things like anti-kickback or Stark violations. We're seeing a shift in the culture in the business aspects of healthcare. So, but there are still some of those written and unwritten rules of behavior, and it's all driven by your culture. So your culture, for example, if you work in a place where the culture is very, it promotes volunteerism. It puts people in a position where they're able to give of themselves to their patients, but then also maybe to the community. And, there's no rule that says that you have to volunteer or take part in those types of activities, but you see your employees going out and volunteering on behalf of the organization at events like community events, taking blood pressures or helping with COVID clinics or those types of things. There's nothing written that drives that. It's the culture of the organization that'll drive that. There are plenty of written rules, and that's your code of conduct, code of ethics, mission, vision, values. But the unwritten underpinning of many organizations is what helps to drive culture. So it's the written and unwritten rules of behavior in an organization are really that culture. And again, as a compliance person, because when you're a compliance officer in an organization, your task is really to drive the moral and ethical character of your organization, as well as to make sure you're in compliance from a legal perspective. And so it's having a culture of compliance is something that's really important to have in a healthcare organization. And there are many that don't. I've worked with a couple over the years that just did not, being compliant was not something that was part of their culture. Example, so I had a discussion with somebody one day that they used to have a situation where they were tasked with working with the Department of Health surveyors when they would come in to do their surveys at this particular organization. And they knew, and this was a few years ago, and you'll be able to tell from this, but they knew that surveyor that was assigned by the state really liked Beanie Babies. It was when Beanie Babies were being collected. So they had when the surveyor would come in, she would stop by the gift shop in the hospital and get a few Beanie Babies for free. And that would help to drive better reviews on their state survey. Well, obviously this is immoral, unethical, illegal in many ways as well, and is a bribe to that surveyor. But the person that I happened to be speaking with about that thought that was just normal business and that was appropriate. So that told me a lot about the culture of that organization. They clearly had a culture of, do whatever you can at all costs to make sure that we don't have an issue with something. And that's certainly not the type of place that most of us would want to work. Similarly, I've had discussions with that person about how it was common for the CEO and other members of the senior staff to just stand and scream at employees in the hallways and berate them. Who wants to work in a culture like that? So it's really written and unwritten rules of behavior, typically seen as a tone from the top. How does the top level behave? That's how the rest of the organization will as well. Last question, I think it's the last one. Health services manager is considered, and again, another all of the above, or not all of the above, select all that apply. So the three answers there, or the two answers that are underlined, those are our correct answers: a moral agent and a moral advocate. So as a moral agent, you yourself are using morality and a high level of ethics in your behavior and your activities, but then you're also an advocate for those similar activities from your staff, from the people that you deal with, your other stakeholders, external stakeholders. You expect that from them. So a moral activist and moral agnostic, not really applicable here. It's the health services manager is really going to be a moral agent and a moral advocate. And that's how the ACHE Code of Ethics was built. And there's a section in the textbook about that as well. So let's hop back over to the classroom. In week 3, we're going to talk, really focus on administrative ethics. So it's kind of where we've been. We've been getting kind of a base of ethical theories, moral philosophies, those types of things. Now we're going to talk about relationships with outside entities, with staff, with patients and families, and what the obligations of a healthcare administrator are with regard to these things. So things like conflict of interest, dealing with dilemmas with patients in an organization, all sorts of different areas. So our discussion is a short case study that we'll have in there, and then we also have an individual case study for you to work on this week, and I'll just pop it open here quick. Oh, sorry, it's not there. I'm trying to submit it and I haven't opened it yet. So this is our case study. So it's the study itself, and then we have the 5 discussion questions at the end. And this is about flu shots. So it's interesting to, when we're talking right now about vaccinations and herd immunity. This is a little older, but this was specifically talking about flu shots and how, some of the dilemmas associated with them. So that is our work this week. And then you have the quiz. I did review the quiz questions and I didn't see any issues in these, and I will take some time this week to go through all of them throughout the rest of the quizzes for the class and see if I have any other ones that look like we had this past week in week 2. But as always, if you have any questions, issues, problems, just let me know. I will get that week 2 grading done, like I said, probably within the next couple days. And I hope everyone has a good week, and we'll see you in the classroom. Thanks.